Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcasting all things software development. I am here in beautiful Building 25 in Redmond, Washington, and as always, the one and only Frank Kruger on an island somewhere.
It's somewhere. I'm not even sure where sometimes. It's best not to know. Some things, it's good to be ignorant.
I have the good microphone working, as I'm sure you can tell.
Mm.
However, I don't have enough. I don't have the right dongles and or cables to get both the things set up for the nice red camera here. So I'm on my Surface laptop camera.
I also have to say, I see a very nice green screen rolled up in the background. I don't think that's how green screens work. I think you have to unroll the green screen to make it
That
green.
I'd have to get on a ladder, and then that'd be very difficult to do. That is for sure. But there are lights, as people can
Oh, you don't
see,
have a button?
everywhere. I do not have a button. No, this is cool. We're in Channel 9. This is where .NET Conf and all this stuff happens. And we've done podcasts from here. I'm here at the MVP Summit this week, even though Frank is an MVP. He's got a lot of, is a far on an island and also forgot to register. But quite fun. A lot of cool things coming out. And Frank, I actually don't know if you know about this AI thing that I'm going to talk about today.
I have been doing my research, James. I am all about no code agents AI. Man, like you just keep clicking. Sometimes it fails. You just click some more. You yell at it a little, and then it works eventually. And I'm down for this. So I don't know. You're gonna have to go far for me to not know.
Okay. I do think that, it's definitely going to be a year of talking about agents nonstop. And actually, I was at VS Live in Vegas a few weeks ago and saw some super compelling demos. Obviously, I'm here at Summit, saw a lot of compelling demos. And I've been playing with agent mode, right? And that's been super compelling to have this coding assistant do more things. And actually, part of that, what's so fascinating is something that's not necessarily new, but is new to me, and I think new to a lot of people, and it's the buzzword of the century. And I have a video coming out about how this is supported with Copilot and Visual Studio Code, but it's Model Context Protocol, the MCP servers.
Yeah, okay. You got me because you have talked about this before, I think on the show here. I don't know. I think I've everything I know about it's from you. Um but actually don't know too much. So this is going to be a good James teaches.
Yes. Oh, I will try my darndest, and I apologize for anybody that maybe is an expert in this area. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are new. So I'm going to try to do my best to give the basic groundwork in general. I've described it in a few different ways. Okay, so think of it like this. Today, you have a model or an agent that could be GitHub Copilot, that could be Claude, that could be Copilot, right? The Microsoft Copilot. You have you're asking a model something. You're asking ChatGPT something, right? The question is, as developers or as people, you would really like for those models to be able to call into other things. So, for example, maybe and take action upon those things. So, for example, maybe you want to query a list of Airbnb things. Maybe you want to query a list of GitHub repositories. Maybe you'd like to create an issue for that exception that just popped up inside of Visual Studio Code, for example, when you're coding. Maybe you'd like to have it merge pull requests because you finished something. Maybe you would like for a bug to open an issue in ServiceNow or send an email or do something, right? And you're kind of right. We're talking about like agents, or we're talking about automation. But how do you connect that glue together? If we're all building different APIs and we're all trying to integrate 1,000 ways, what is a common way for us to do this? Well, that is what the Model Context Protocol is, MCP. Now, I think that there's a lot of ways of doing this, but actually I was talking to Julia Casper, who is on the APIM team and API-C team, which is API Management, API Center, and they do a bunch of cool stuff. But you think about it, it's a protocol. It's an open standard protocol to provide context to models. So kind of in reverse, right? So you have a model, you need to give it additional context, and you need to be able to call these protocols. Now, I think that the Model Context Protocol.io website does a really good job. It says MCP, it's an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to LLMs. They say, think of MCP like a USB-C port for AI applications. Just as USB-C provides a standardized way to connect your devices to various peripherals and accessories, MCP provides a standardized way to connect AI models to different data sources and tools. So, for example, Frank Krueger, I'm inside of a GitHub Copilot, and I could ask it to query an issue that I think maybe exists in .NET MAUI. So I say, hey, go to the .NET MAUI repo. I have this issue. What are the top open issues? It doesn't have one. Create an issue for me. It provides all the context, provides actions that I've authenticated with GitHub, for example, right? That's a pretty cool use case. Now, I could then also maybe go to Claude Desktop, or I could go to other code editors with other tools. And if they use these MCPs that I've configured on my machine, I could use them everywhere. We don't have to create 1,000 different APIs or integrations. It's a standardized way of basically bringing those things together. And there are a bunch of servers out there, for example, and then I'll shut up for a second while you dive through this. But
Oh, I
on,
have things to say,
yeah.
sir.
On GitHub, Model Context Protocol /servers, you'll see things like, hey, here's a Git one, a file system, a GitHub, a GitLab, a Google Drive, a Google Maps, like a Postgres, a Redis, a Sentry, Slack, SQL, a time capability, right, that are in here. And you'll see all these integrations that are out there. There's a Playwright one to do screen, scraping and automation of web, for example. There's Raygun ones that you could query these things. So to me, it is like, we've all created these REST APIs as like a standard way of like our applications interfacing with our backend services. How would we create a standardized RESTful approach for AI? Well, that's what MCP is trying to do in general. That's my MCP
Ding,
pitch.
done. How long was that? That was pretty good. Maybe that was 5 minutes. We'll call that 5 minutes. You need a drink. Can I say, although this is new to me, I can say I actually know a lot about all the parts of this. I didn't realize that someone was working on what honestly is a Herculean effort, because what it really boils down to is APIs. So we've quickly learned that we want our AIs talking to APIs because although they're vast, they don't know everything. They need to query stuff. So you were talking about that. Yep. So we expose tools to them and give them access to stuff. We explain the JSON input format, the JSON output format. But okay, so you can do that for your own data, but boy, that's kind of tiring if I have to write all those for GitHub and if I have to write all those for every API service out there. And so I actually really applaud this effort. I'm curious because standardization attempts are difficult, but it seems like there's a lot of backers here, a lot of big names. You just rattled off a lot of big names. So it seems like there's some industry buy-in on this. So it'd be cool because the alternative really is kind of horrendous. I've been using these no-code agent UIs. I don't know how to pronounce this one. N8N Nathan.com or dot something, and then make.com. They're both really nice. In my head, I call them orchestrators. I don't know what the technical term is, but it's doing what you're saying. You're gluing together agents, you're passing around packets of information, you have inputs, outputs, triggers, all that kind of stuff, and you're talking to services. Now, I don't know exactly how these no-code solutions are implemented, but when I was using them, it kind of felt like they just had a team of people painfully adapting every API to work with their system. Now, it's possible they're using something like MCP because I didn't actually know about MCP. So thank you for that. This is a good education because what's super cool is if you have one of these tools and it talks MCP, then you can expose your services more easily. So super cool. I applaud standardization attempts. They're hard, especially because there's been momentum in proprietary solutions too. So it's the Wild West, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything's available, but this is cool. I like this.
Yeah, I've been playing around because, you think of it like this, they break this down in the intro as well, which is like there's host, client, servers, and then they interact with things, right? So a host is like Claude Desktop, it's IDEs or other AI tools that want to access data, right? So for example, Anthropic is the company that sort of invented this thing. Like they were the first. That's why you'll see Claude everywhere, Claude Desktop everywhere, and then Claude Code and things like that. And you'll see IDEs like Visual Studio Code, for example, or Cursor or whatever, like will integrate with these MCP servers. And then you have these clients, and these are the protocol clients that are like talking with the servers. And I think that's kind of like GitHub Copilot, for example. And then there's like the servers themselves, which are those lightweight programs that expose them. And you can create these MCP servers in multiple languages. So there's actually a Python SDK, a TypeScript SDK, a Java SDK, a Kotlin SDK, and there's an official C# SDK from the team at Microsoft. Fun fact.
Cool. I
Yeah,
actually
that was
really
just
want to check that out. I'm excited now.
yeah, and the C# SDK, um, you can create both clients. So if you were creating your own, integration into your application, you could consume MCP servers, and then you can also create MCP servers too. So like that's really cool. Now, the cool part here that I've been trying to figure out is like, what does that mean for me as a developer, right? Because Claude Desktop to me is kind of like Microsoft Copilot, where I'm like chatting with it. And I can see the example there where I want to query a bunch of things and have a bunch of things like out there doing actions. I said the GitHub example, but I also did say the like ServiceNow example, which was like, oh, I'm doing this thing, this bug comes up, I need to open a bug in this third-party tool. How do I stay in the flow, for example, that's out there? But I think as these MCP servers continue, for example, you could query for top issues from like Raygun or from Sentry, or you could analyze your backend services to understand like, are there current issues that are going on? And what that does, it kind of makes like, to me, in this case, if I'm using GitHub Copilot with VS Code, it makes it as if I don't have to jump around between all these different AI tools, like that I might query this data, right? Like I don't have to jump into the Azure
Yeah.
portal and to do this thing. Like I have like a hub that I'm using
Yeah.
for my dev flow in general that's out there. But I also think of it like longer term, imagining like if it could speak to your support email system that you have, like maybe you have a ticketing system for Calca or for iCircuit, that you could just go into your editor and say, give me the top issues. Okay, like then you could ask it of Copilot to like fix that bug, create that issue, track that in your system. So that's sort of like the glue, is like, how do you stay in your coding tool and not have to worry about these other things out there? So that's how I'm like trying to envision it all up. Although the GitHub one is like the biggest source of what I would do, but like there's all these other integrations, and I'm sure like, you start to think about this connective tissue glue and you're like, okay, well, I could start to do these other things. So it's kind of a cool spiral scope, but we're still early days.
We're early days, and I have to yell at you because you're in a little bit of a bubble. The GitHub one is neat for us programmers, but I think it's kind of in the future the least important one. It's dealing with code. Like services, proper services are going to be the future. Just servers exchanging data with each other, AIs exchanging data with each other. I think the fun thing about coding with these agents is you realize you're working at a much higher level than I think we're accustomed to as programmers. So you're just shipping around these packets of JSON. Sure, that's low level. We understand that as programmers, but you're always talking to APIs and you're talking to AIs and you're taking those. Those are the new function calls. APIs are our function calls now. AIs are our function calls now. And we're combining them in fun and interesting ways. And I think I want to see these kind of services expand outside of just the programmer world and all that, because I really do see this as kind of the future of programming. We'll see. I don't want to be the hype man overhyping everything, but this is definitely a level of abstraction higher than most programmers, you and I, are accustomed to, what we're trained in, what we're most accustomed to dealing with. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun seeing this new level of abstraction at play. And that's why I want to see other things than just like GitHub, pull the weather, generate a video, add a soundtrack, throw in some text, output that, build some real high level fun integrations of all these things.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like the things that we're doing every single day, how can we call into all these things? And I think the cool part too, and you mentioned it, which is data being passed around from agent to agent. So for example, like, I mean, even in my coding example, just because like this is the world that I'm living in, like you said, in the bubble that I'm living in right now. But for example, like if you think about like GitHub Copilot being the agent that's speaking to other agents, like it's taking context of my application. So for example, I could ask it to say, hey, I want to implement this new feature, figure out what files I should be making changes in or where this bug exists, and then go update the pull request over there. So it's like going to go figure out the data. It's going to use that context, it's going to use LLMs to call that thing, and it's going to pass that data around. But imagine a scenario that like, it's like not only, grab that GitHub issue, but then kick off like something to like implement some code or to trigger something else, like that the information that you created on GitHub then gets passed into another agent that's processing something else to do something else in your workflow, right? These workflows that you're talking about is fascinating to think about. And I do think some of that low code stuff like Copilot Studio and these other things that you're using to build these little agents to do this stuff is like, I started this with like Power Automate, which was Flow, which was like, you let me automate all the
Oh yeah.
things. And Power Automate made a lot of sense. But I think of it like, how do I inject these agents like into these workflows that will then get triggered, right? And that data will get passed around. So I think that's the coolest part is like this stuff will get passed around and then other processes will kick off. And ideally, that stuff is just automated, like you're saying. Like you
Yeah.
might have something that's set up that you've created that's like, oh yeah, whenever a GitHub issue does this thing, that do these 5 other things, and then these things are working in the background. I think to me, why I like all this and why I think I'm talking about it and it excites me is because one, I love automation. Like it's the one thing I just love so much because it frees me up from having to do stuff that is wasting my time. And I think the other part, when I actually did can you create this issue on this repo? The bug report and the issue feature request that it created was so much better than I could have written. Like, and I was just thinking, if I would have created this issue, it would have been like implement camera feature. And then no, this thing is like, hey, implement this camera feature. Like, here are your options. Like, here are the pages. Like, here's the details. I was like, wow, this is like so much better. Like, do I
Yeah.
need this information? Like, I don't know. But if I was creating that for you, that'd be like I'm thinking about like I get a bug on my machine, I get a crash, and I need to report that to the Maui team or something like that. I'd be like, oh yeah, just take all this information and like yeah, give
Generate
it to
bug
them.
report.
Yeah, generate a bug report. I mean, but think about the time savings that was there. Or imagine, like you're saying, I'm just so excited, Frank, is like, imagine the automation in your idea where you're like, hey, whenever I hit some exception, blah, 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 capture all this stuff, do this stuff, summarize all the errors, and then also like create a ticket that I can triage, blah, 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 right? If I like say to go do that thing and then it just does it. Like, that's cool. That saves you time to actually work on your application.
Yeah, and then think of bank tellers doing that. Maybe someday we'll hit that user programmability utopia we've all been striving for. And yeah, I think a lot of these workflows are super fun. It's that high level of abstraction. I'm going to stick with it because you're working with these bigger APIs. You just got to pass the data around, and you can do some fun things. It's easy to orchestrate it all. Uh, the fun thing is, I keep talking about these no code solutions, but we're programmers. um, Drawing in diagrams, writing workflows and diagrams, that's fun for about 3 minutes until you're like, I'm drawing this arrow to here or to here. You're like, it's a function call. It's
Yeah.
a loop. It's an if statement. And as programmers, we know how to write functions and if statements and things like that. So it's kind of fun. I take it as a challenge to myself. Like, I need some higher level functions to program at the abstraction level that these GUI no code workflows are presenting to people, but still with code, because if you know how to code, like, it's just faster. And then I promise you, then going into 1,000 properties and trying to data bind this, you can create a variable, everyone. It's amazing. This amazing thing called the variable. So I'm excited to actually take some of the inspiration I'm getting from this new level of abstraction, as I keep calling it, and applying it to my own stuff. I'm like, APIs have been around for what, 20, 30 years? And I've always been like, there's just too many of them. But with this kind of MCP thing, with everyone just starting to kind of talk to each other, at least just having a neural network comprehend what the protocol is saying, at least, I don't know, maybe it is time I start applying these like to my own code, because I don't want to draw diagrams all the time. Those are dumb.
Yeah, and I think about it as the same thing, like deploying these are kind of like mini agents inside of bigger agents. But yeah, that does get to the question of like, how do I just like create the agent, right, all up that I
Hmm.
want to deploy anywhere? So I think that like we're going to see, a lot more of this basically going forward. And like, if you just put MCP into YouTube or into Google, like it's just gonna be like 1,000 things, you know what I mean? How to do it.
Hmm.
I'd say this, the fascinating part, if I dive a little bit deeper on the MCP story, is like it is a fascinating story because let's say Frank creates a iCircuit MCP, which enables me to query and get insight into all of your iCircuit diagrams and information, and pulls things down. Right, you could almost transform things and put things in wherever you're at, whether it's on a desktop app or whether it's in VS Code or whatever it is. Right. The thing is that that MCP server needs to run somewhere. Right, like you're not deploying these MCP servers to the cloud. Right, you already have your REST services there today, at least.
Hmm.
These MCP servers, what's fascinating about them is you run them on your local machine and you configure them on your local machine, and they're written in multiple programming languages. So for example, if you write your MCP server in Python or JavaScript or .NET, you have to have that thing installed on your machine. So for example, the GitHub MCP server, and most MCP servers are available in two ways, I should say. First, it's available as whatever written language it was written in. So for example, by default, there's this date time one where you can query and you can, query the current time. And then you can also like, convert times or whatever. It's a nice sample reference. Well, that's written in Python. I don't have Python on my machine. I know. I'm one of those, but I'm a purist, not try to withhold from installing Python for as long as possible. But that won't run. Now the GitHub one is written in it's a Node npx package or whatever, however it runs. So I have Node on my machine because everyone's got Node on their machine. Everyone probably has Python on their machine too, but that will obviously run. So now I'm running this Node server. Basically, it's there. So they're deployed there. So it would be nice if everything was written in .NET because I already have .NET on my machine. That's awesome. However, that being said, everything is almost also distributed as a Docker container too, a Docker image that you can run in containers.
Hmm.
So that is really nice. I think from a security perspective, that makes the most sense. I'm not running these random little servers there. That is cool. So those are the two options basically that are out there. But the other question, really quick, is like, how many freaking Docker containers do I want to run these little servers? Well, good thing we got
Infinite.
64 gigs of RAM, Frank. I'm just saying.
Good thing I got the big hard drive
Oh gosh.
because, well, actually, people have been pretty good. I mentioned NAN. That thing is best distributed as a little Docker, but I think that was only a couple hundred megabytes. And
Mm.
so, did I say megabytes? um, s- yeah, so I think they're doing good, and I think Docker. You said security. I think Docker for simplicity,
Yeah.
although it's gigantic, and yes, it will eventually eat all of your hard drive. It's still so much simpler than configuring your machine to run any of this stuff. Life is just better. So I do recommend that. Um, yeah, these servers are written in all the languages. It was funny because you were talking about GitHub being written, and I see it's actually TypeScript. Uh,
Hmm.
it's funny because I was looking in the Git folder, not the GitHub, and I'm like, "This is Python, James. What world are you living on?" So they really are in all the different languages, but that's kind of neat because a lot of examples for different languages. Then, so you should be able to feel comfortable implementing one of these if you have to. I'm not 100% clear on under what circumstances Frank, the developer, has to do it. So, like, does my iCircuit website run an MCP server? Do I run an MCP server as a NuGet package I distribute? What do I do, James?
No, so you won't run them at all. Uh, you would basically distribute it as. That's a good question. I think the .NET one. I'm not sure if it is like a global tool that maybe is run. I'm not really sure. I haven't looked too much deep into it, but obviously, I think like the Python ones, you just pip it down, so it's like a Python package, and then
Mhm.
for the Node.js ones, I guess it's just a Node package. So I'm assuming it's just like a, a global tool from .NET. I assume that runs. That's my assumption. I'm not positive, but that's going to be running on your local machine, right? So you distribute it
Okay.
in that way. So you're not running a server at all, right?
Hmm.
But the person So this is where I think it's like still young, right? And you can see in this, which is like the person, let's say me, James, I'm like, I'm going to use Frank's iCircuit MCP server because I'm doing a bunch of cool like electrical engineering and I need to, some stuff and
Mhm.
whatever you're doing, right? I can, maybe, NuGet down or pip down or npm down and configure your server, and that'll run on my machine that
Mhm.
you've deployed. Now I can configure it though. So there's often variables that need to be passed in. So for example, if you have an API key, I would need to enter my API key and pass it into your application, right? So instead of like you running on the server and me talking to your server, I'm running and talking on my local machine, which is then talking to your servers, right? So like it's me running locally as if I was HTTP, as if I was making the REST request, right? Like if
Yeah.
I was building an application to hit your servers, I would be running that application on my local machine. But in this case, the server, which you've sort of masked in this MCP server that can talk to all of your REST endpoints or whatever they are, is able to run on my local machine, right? So
Yeah.
from your perspective, it's hey, I want people, I want developers, I want whoever to use my service more in any of these clients, whether that's Cloud Desktop, whether that's in
Mhm.
IDEs like this that are going to consume this data, which should be kind of fascinating.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So it's just one level of indirection. There's kind of a middle person and MCP person kind of in the
Mhm.
way that's doing all this. So I think we're definitely gonna have to do another episode on this because I kind of want to write both ends of this and see how it feels, both the consumption side and the implementation side of MCP. I think that's the only way I actually learn anything. I have to do it. um, because honestly, I'm still a little bit confused of who's running all these MCPs. Like, let's say I have an agent and it's using 400 different APIs out there. Are all those MCPs running in one Docker instance? Are they all running in individual instances? I have a lot of little detail questions like that, but I'm sure reading the docs and playing around will answer a lot of my questions.
Yeah, I think that uh, so Copilot Studio, for example, this is kind of what you're saying. Copilot
Mhm.
Studio is a low code way of creating Copilot or agents, right? And AI apps to integrate. They just introduced MCP support in Copilot Studio. So what that means is that those MCP servers are made available as connectors. Now, what's cool about that is like what you're saying is now you can create these agents in these low code scenarios that can speak to any MCP servers out there. So in that instance, that Copilot Studio is then running those servers for you, right? And then they are the ones that are like, hey, these
Mhm.
things are required basically to input. So you're totally right. Like they could be running on some server in Azure or something like that, right? That are doing these connectors, or they could be running on your local machine based on your use case that you're trying to do. So I see it as instead of everyone trying to create formats and integrations, it's actually really cool. It's like the evolution of anything almost, where it's like everyone's raced
Whoa,
to like,
whoa!
not, I mean, it's kind of like
It's APIs. It's an evolution of
APIs. It's
APIs.
it's an
Yeah.
evolution of APIs where it's like, oh, we could create APIs in 1,000 different ways. Let's standardize it, right? So it's like we
Yeah.
can all compete against doing integration services, and you saw that, right? There was different integrations for different services that were out there that you could write specifically for one thing. But I think Anthropics was like, hey, let's try to standardize this in a way so we can use it across our product suite and then other people could use it as well. And I think that's really nice in general. So
Mhm.
you can create one. So for example, you might create a server about iCircuit, and then you could use natural language to say, hey, can you summarize the most popular iCircuit, blah, 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 and then do a report on blah, 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 right? And like it'll know all that data that you have, and then it'll spit out whatever. And you can put it into a chart, and then it's like, oh, maybe whatever thing can't generate a chart, but maybe some other MCP server could take your data and generate a
Yeah.
chart. And then, oh, guess what? Also, can you do that every single night and then also generate an email for
Oh,
me that I get a report on? Like that's what we're talking about here.
yeah. That's what we're talking about. But can I take us on a little side tangent for a minute?
I love your side tangents. It's why I do this podcast, Frank.
A lot of the real power of neural networks and AI actually still lies in the specialized networks. The world's been revolutionized by these general purpose LLMs for sure. But there are a lot of specialized neural networks out there. Go browse around Azure, go browse around Hugging Face, and they do really amazing things. And you can get like, you can write some really fun scenarios if you just combine lots of neural networks together. Like, do this
Mm.
in this little pass, do this in this one. Use specialized networks for those specialized tasks. And that's what I really like about these kind of, I'm sorry, I keep saying orchestrations. I know that word's just stuck in my head right now. Workflows, whatever you want to call these things, data flow diagrams, control flow diagrams, whatever. The the neat thing is I've totally lost my track when I was going down that path. But I'll just end there. I think I said kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of newness. I think the point that you're getting at is like right now we're talking about services that these LLMs are integrating in. However, I do think you're right. Like what is awesome about an agent or a co-pilot is its ability to figure out what are the right things to call, whether that be LLMs, whether that be
Mhm.
services, and how to regurgitate this all back up. If I'm talking about code, picking the best code thing. If I'm talking about this thing, writing a poem, give me the best writing thing. If I'm
Yeah.
crunching data science numbers, give me that thing. And like combine them all together so they all work really good. And I think actually I think today we are still in a space where we need to pick those things. And I don't like that. I don't like picking things,
It's
right?
okay.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But what I'm saying is, I see a world like right now, VS Code just added the ability to add a custom model. So you can run it in Olama, for example. You can run any model you want in Olama, and then GitHub
Mhm.
Copilot will talk to that, right? Or it can talk to Anthropic, it can talk to Azure AI. You can do custom models all you want, right? And you got to go and pick it. I think that's awesome, right? That's so cool. But you can see a world like you're talking about, which I see it, which is like, yeah. Like know the model that's best for C# applications or best for
Yeah.
Python or best for whatever. Like, don't use the generic model. Use the thing that is awesome at this thing that's custom, highly trained on it, and that's the thing that I want you to use for this operation. Like, be
Yeah.
smart enough to figure that out. I don't know how that happens, but I want that
And
to be the case.
and like you said, do it in stages too. Don't try to solve the problem all at once. Break it down into multiple parts and use specialized networks for all those parts. This has always been possible. The beauty of these new solutions is just it's a lot easier now because I can tell you, getting one model from let's say 5 years ago running on a Linux machine was a pain. Getting two of them to run on that machine, you better be a professional Unix developer so you can survive it. Getting multiple models on the machine, just give up. You're using Docker, you're doing something crazy. Um, it's a lot of work, just to just be blunt. And now, one last time, we're raising that level of abstraction, and now running specialized networks and chaining their outputs is trivial.
Yeah,
And take advantage of that. Don't pay for the most expensive model for every operation. Pay for the cheap model for the easy operations. Pay for the expensive model for the big, hard operations.
exactly. I love it. Anyways, that's my brief introduction to MCP and this agent world. There's gonna be so much more to talk about, I am sure. Um, but I'm also interested if you do go down this rabbit hole of creating your own MCP server with the C# SDK. That'd be pretty cool. See how it works and just see how it goes. You're the only one that I know that has APIs, so I think that'd be great too. Actually, I think like
You-
I have a little weather API about hyperlocal data, and that could be kind of cool to do something over.
Monkeys,
Ooh.
JSON isn't going to qualify for an MCP server.
No, but like, I have the skiing app and like it'd be super cool to be like, hey, like, what are
Yeah,
the conditions and like
analyze it.
feed it. Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Predict the weather, baby.
I love it. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it, Frank, for this merge conflict. What do you think about
I think I learned a lot, and I think I have even more questions. So I think you're right.
that?
We will talk about it some more.
Well, it's good. I'm glad that I got to bring an AI topic to you, Frank Kruger, and help a little bit. And like I said, I'm not an expert by all means, but I think what's cool about this podcast, and like if you've listened to us for 458 bajillion episodes, it's like sometimes you get on the inside of like what's ticking in our brain right now, right? And what is this happening? And sometimes you see us in different parts of our journey. right? And Frank is very far on his AI journey, but I'm in different stages of mine. And there's always new stuff too, right? So there's always new things happening. So it's like these things are like, oh, and then I dive deep into it, right? And then I want to kind of tell where I'm at in the story. And that might be different 2 weeks from now, for 4 months from now, or whatever it is. And the whole industry will be different, of course. But what's cool is hopefully if you're following on this journey, you're kind of living and breathing this with us, and you get to see how Frank and I are learning this stuff too. And that's why I like doing this podcast, because I learn stuff from you, and hopefully sometimes on small occasions you learn stuff from me, Frank.
Totes. I may have started earlier, but things are coming out fast. And yeah, gotta keep up.
Yep.
So oftentimes you're ahead of me, buddy. It's fun.
I try. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.